Happy Bitcoin Friday, freaks. It's your host, ODELL, here for another Sale Dispatch, the show focused on actionable Bitcoin and freedom tech discussion. I'm broadcasting here live from the Bitcoin TV studio at Bitcoin Park with my good friend CK. Before we get started, I want to thank all the freaks who continue to support the show with Bitcoin donations. Dispatch is unique in that we do not have ads or sponsors. It is purely funded by donations from our audience. So thank you to everyone who continues to contribute to the show. The easiest way to support the show is by going to citadeldispatch.com/donate. You can send either Bitcoin on chain or Bitcoin via Lightning. You can include a message. You can try and rise up on the leaderboard that's shown there, or you can donate anonymously. You can also donate via my BIP47 Paynim. Easy to remember. It is ODELL. That is compatible with Samurai Wallet, Sparrow Wallet, and now Stack Wallet, latest wallet to add BIP47 payment code support. And I believe Blue Wallet is about to merge it as well, which is pretty cool to see. You can also support the show using various podcasting 2.0 apps, such as Breeze Wallet, Podverse.fm, and Fountain Podcasts. With those apps, you simply search Sale Dispatch, press that subscribe button, load it up with Bitcoin, choose how much Bitcoin per minute you think the show is worth, and those sats get streamed directly to my node. Extremely empowering seeing all your sats come in live to my node. You can also donate through Podcasting 2.0 something called Boostergrams. Boostergrams are where you attach a message to a amount of sats. As is tradition, I read the top 4 boostergrams from the last episode. We have at SVEINOL Sfinal with 55,555 sats saying mandibles, stay humble and stack sats. Great advice. We have at McCoy with 10,000 sats. Another stellar Rip Odell threads the needle, allowing the discussion to flow between the guests, interjecting succinct takes, keeping everyone honest. We have Ride or Die Freak 8 Mithrandur with 7,777 sats, saying Block Wars, a great book, an important account of history for all future Citadel libraries. Had the pleasure of having BitMEX research on the last episode. If you freaks haven't picked up Block Wars, the Block Size War, I think it was what it's called. You should pick it up. It's a great book about the 2017 Block Size War. If you weren't around, it is an absolute must read. And then we have at Slim Shady with 101 sats, and he just said P, which is great advice. And I appreciate all the freaks who continue to support the show. Also, I know it's a bear market. I know it's a recession. Might turn into a global economic depression as well. So if you don't have sats to spare, you can always support the show by subscribing on your favorite platform. It's available on all podcasting apps. Leaving a review helps. Sharing it with friends and family helps. It's also available on Rumble, Twitch, YouTube, Bitcoin TV, and Twitter. Sharing it, subscribing, leaving reviews, all that helps. And then one last shout out. Dispatch is very unique in that we have a live interactive chat where audience members join the conversation. Our chat is streamed from Twitch, YouTube, Twitter. We have our Matrix chat, which you can find at citadeldispatch.com/chat, which is 24/7, 365 on that end. And you guys are part of the conversation. You're part of the conversation. You're one of the hosts of the show. You keep us honest. And it's really great to have that audience participation. So thank you to everyone who continues to join the live chat. You guys make it special. So thank you. With all that said, I have good friend in the studio, CK Snarks, Christian. How's it going,
freaks?
Christian?
It's going good.
I never call you Christian. How's it going, CK?
CK is better.
You just got back from a long trip. It's good to have you back in Nashville.
It's good to be back in Nashville, man. Going on vacation's always fun, but you always kind of miss your bed a little bit. You miss home, so it's good to be back. Feels good, and Bitcoin Magazine, we're grinding towards Bitcoin 2023, 55 days away. So
55 days.
Yeah, man. There's no shortage of work to do on that front.
Meanwhile, we got Balaji calling for $1 million Bitcoin in 83 days now, I believe.
I know, if he's right, it's going to be a hell of an event.
Might have a humble 200K by conference day based on his projections, not by mine. I don't really know. I don't make projections anymore.
Bitcoin tends to surprise you.
I just
those are the
stay
good
humble and
times.
stack sats.
Those are the good times.
You know, I looked up the other day. I think I've said good morning, stay humble, stack sats on Twitter. Manually typed out.
We know.
178 days, I think it's been in a row, something like that. Crazy streak.
You pick up any other good habits?
When I started that, FTX was still alive, BlockFi was still alive, Barry Silbert didn't owe billions of dollars to people. A lot of shit has gone down. You know, banks didn't fail yet. We didn't have bank runs yet.
Dude,
Credit Suisse was still an independent company. A lot of things have happened.
Bitcoin happens fast. It happens fast, man.
So what are we going to talk about today? I titled the episode Hyperbitcoinization, Strong Communities, and Sovereign Individuals. I know you love the sovereign individual thesis.
Yep.
And the freaks know I love just shilling books left and right. If they haven't read The Sovereign Individual, they should read that. And also, if they haven't, I've recently, not that recently, maybe like a year ago, read When Money Dies, which is like, it's a very dense book, but it's a good one. It recounts the Germany hyperinflation crisis.
I bought that one twice and have not read it yet. So
it's really dense. Like, I'm not going to pretend I finished it. The way I look at it is like Mandibles is the easier read version.
Dude, so Mandibles first, then Sovereign Individual, and then if you really just like have a hankering for punishment, I guess When Money Dies.
So where do you want to start, CK?
I mean, my shtick is, I think stay humble, stack sats is the perfect advice. So kudos to you for putting the perfect advice into words, into a slogan, popularizing it. Generally speaking, when Bitcoiners say things like you can never have enough Bitcoin, or they do like financially irresponsible things, it makes me think that they're like, one, not humble enough, and two, not bullish enough. So it kind of grinds my gears. So I mean, I'd love to have a conversation with you and tease that out. But I mean, if you really understand what hyper-Bitcoinization looks like in like practicality in terms of Bitcoin, I just think that people are really miscalibrated for what that world will look like in Bitcoin terms, and it's causing them to behave irrationally in hindsight.
So
yeah.
I mean, CK, I am humbly all in on Bitcoin, and I humbly believe that I do not have enough Bitcoin. So how am I acting irrational? Why don't you hit me with some hard talk here?
Okay, well, how much Bitcoin do you need to be satisfied when Bitcoin hits hyper-Bitcoinization?
I don't think that number does not exist.
Okay, like break that down to me, because I mean, there's plenty of like targets that you could put that, you know, might sound logical. Like when you think of wealth, my problem is like when you think of wealth as a person, like how do you think about that? And the reality is like there's a number where your life is amazing, right? Where like your physical wants are taken care of. You have, you know, vast amounts of security and opportunity that you can create for yourself. So like that number exists, and then put that number.
And that number is different for every person.
Sure, it's different for everybody. Like to make good economic calculations today for the future, like you got to at least know that number, right? And from there, like you need to put it in Bitcoin terms and then project that through some level of adoption curve that you're expecting.
Do you conceptualize that in fiat terms currently, or?
Well, you know me, I like to say 37 sats equals generational wealth. So I don't think
you should have substantially more than 37 sats. Like I think that's a way low ball.
No, I mean, like you have a massive opportunity.
Like currently you can get right now you can get 3581 sats, 3,581 sats for $1.
Fantastic.
Yeah.
I mean, hey, you have a massive opportunity to stack a disgusting amount of sats in a hyper-Bitcoinized world today.
We have Narwhal Tacos here. Matt wants enough Bitcoin to buy the Bitcoin skull for Bitcoin Park. I mean, I think that would be a nice starting point. Yeah.
I mean, you might have enough. It sounds like he didn't even get commissioned the value of one Bitcoin to do the whole thing.
No, look, I mean, I respect that. Look, there are things the way I look at Bitcoin is like the base unit of my time. The only thing that is more scarce than Bitcoin is my time, right? So if I put time into something, I want to store that in Bitcoin. And if I'm talking about something, if I'm thinking about doing something that requires money, something like Bitcoin Park, I am making a calculation on whether or not those sats are worth the endeavor. So, people always ask Bitcoin Park, like, oh, I would love to have Bitcoin Park in my hometown or in wherever I live. And we love that. Like, I want, Bitcoin is distributed. The cool part is this grassroots Bitcoin movement that is not controlled by anybody. I'm happy to get on a call with anybody to help them, set up their own local community and build out their own local community. We have grassroots Bitcoin here every September. That is, free tickets for anyone who, it's invite only for local Bitcoin meetup organizers for that purpose. But when they ask what the secret is, what is the secret to Bitcoin Park? The secret to Bitcoin Park is that Rod and I believe in it to a point where we're willing to risk a bunch of Bitcoin in the front end, bootstrapping this thing. Like it's losing us sats. We're losing sats every day that Bitcoin Park exists right now, trying to make it sustainable because we think it's a worthy mission, right? It's a worthy concept, right? And so when I think about it, I want as much Bitcoin as possible while still being fulfilled currently. And it's almost, it's there's more correlation there with, like radical saving ideology or something, right? Like reduce expenses, focus on priorities, and try and make and also, I mean, I would like to retire early, right?
Me too.
So I don't know. So to me, it's just I don't know what that number is. I have yet to figure out what that number is. How many sats is how many? I guess that's the question. It's like how many sats is enough to retire?
Again, I think everyone has their own personal number, right? But if you don't have a number, like how can you? I guess like how can you calibrate to your sat opportunity cost appropriately?
I like that sat opportunity cost.
So I mean, like Bitcoiners love giving investment advice, man. Like, don't invest in shit coins, don't speculate on NFTs, all these things. That's all investment advice. Stack sats, don't buy a house. Like, Bitcoiners love fucking investment advice. I personally think that there are some issues with some of the dogmatic investment advice out there. There's a lot of great stuff like stay humble, stack sats, dollar cost averaging,
Right.
owning property. Like there's some fantastic investment advice out there.
I think investment real estate's a shitcoin. But for owning, and I say that as someone who's launching Bitcoin Park, but I think owning your own property, right, or as close to owning your own property as possible in the world of property taxes, is a worthy use of sats. But I think I'm pretty consistent, at least, and I know this is not you're not talking necessarily about me.
You're not the worst perpetrator, that's for sure.
But I'm a strong believer that everyone has the right to get wrecked. Like they can invest in whatever they want. I'm a strong believer that shitcoins and everything else are trending to zero in Bitcoin terms. I think the last few weeks have brought a lot of people onto that side. But if you want to, like, by all means, you're your own person. I believe in personal responsibility. Like if you want to lose your money, like that's your prerogative.
So I don't have anything, like I'm not arguing against that. I'm not arguing against any of the things that you said earlier. I think people should stack as much sats as they can. What I'm challenging them to do is to think through what is the actual value of those sats in a hyper Bitcoinized world, so that way you can calibrate your decision making for today more accurately. And personally, like while stacking sats is a very big part of like what the future is going to look like and having as much Bitcoin as possible, there's a lot of other elements there. You need to get there with your sats. Like I have another saying, like, the world where like Bitcoin was less than a cent and like there's people who were like, they just didn't know the value of it. And they were like, had way more sats back then than now. Like no matter how hard they tried, they've reached their all-time high stat count period. And like, there's a whole generation of Bitcoin. We're still in that paradigm, Matt.
Yeah.
we're still in that paradigm. So like if you don't understand that we're like there's this S curve of adoption idea, like any amount of sats on the bottom of the S will be stupid at the top of the
He's
S.
showing me the S live. I'm looking
Yeah,
at the S.
I'm like making a hand gesture, but you can envision it, right? Any amount at the bottom will be stupid at
But
the
that's
top.
why
That's why 37 sats equals generational wealth, because I'm trying to help people understand that like the arc of Bitcoin, it's like stop thinking about it in dollar terms. You're the ones who are thinking about it in dollar terms by saying like I can't have enough. You
not
can and
necessarily.
will have enough. You already do have enough.
I'm
Like you
thinking
got to
in
get them across the finish line.
first of all, I do not have enough CK. I'm thinking
In what practical terms?
I'm thinking in cattle purchasing power, in acre purchasing power, in water purchasing power. Like I have
In today's world,
like
though, with what assumptions?
water what I, water will be priced in sats at some point. People have to live. They need water, right? Like there will be a water crisis in our future.
Probably.
I don't want my grandkids to have to worry about, using the shitty public water pump, right? Like I want them to have nice quality water, and be able to focus on their priorities. I mean, when I think about it, it's
You
like
sound like a doomer.
I'm an optimist.
Okay.
I'm an optimist. I'm a doomer optimist is what I say.
I
So
think the transitions will have hard times. So I agree with you there.
my theory is the path to hyperbitcoinization is billions of people getting rugged over and over and over again until the Bitcoin standard happens. It's basically a path of pain, while people touch the stove, or their friends touch their stove, or their family touches the stove, and they get burned, and they seek out better options, and they find free and open source tools, including Bitcoin, as a way out, as a lifeboat. That is basically my doomer optimism theory.
I agree 100%. Again, what I'm trying to say is like ultimate, like that's a very small marginal part of Bitcoin's history, right? Like we're at the beginning, there's the transition, and then there's like the Bitcoin world. So I'm just trying to get people to think through like what the world might look like after the like we're at 0.001% adoption, right? Something
Right.
along those lines. Like I define adoption
40
as
million people or something.
sure, and that's probably over optimistic because they're counting like heard of crypto and have an account at an exchange.
Well, no, like Michael Saylor's of the world to say like 150 million, 200
Sure.
million. Like
Yeah.
I try and be more conservative with it.
Yeah, I mean, if you have any sort of conservative filtering, we're 8 billion people, right?
Right.
So we're not even close to 1%. Like, so we're way earlier than I think a lot of Bitcoiners are making credit for, which means that like this hockey stick up is going to be way more violent than we think. And like whatever the price action is right now is it's nothing like the volatility is nothing compared to like getting to 4 billion people using Bitcoin. Like we haven't even come to realize what any real meaningful adoption looks like yet. All of this price action is like a blip, very 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 small blip.
No, I mean, I agree. I think people will look back, right? And, the idea that you're worried about buying Bitcoin at 21,000 versus 28,000 is going to be the same as is going to be so trivial. It'll be the same idea as worrying about buying at 2,100 or 2,800, or worrying about buying at 210 or 280 or $21 and $28, right? Like as time goes on, you start to realize those past short-term volatility price swings or whatever are completely irrelevant. But that's where my feeling that you can't have enough Bitcoin comes from, because it's I have spent so much time in the space, and it's funny because everyone thinks they're late when they come into Bitcoin, right? I thought I was late when I came into Bitcoin. I've been in the Bitcoin space for 10 years now, right? I was extremely late when I came into Bitcoin. There was plenty of people that came in earlier than me. There's that famous Bitcoin talk post where like, I missed the bus, like I should have bought at 11 cents or whatever. And now it's like 30 cents or whatever.
I missed the bus. I should have bought at a million.
But my point is,
I should have bought at 100 million.
My point is, if I could have told younger Matt, if I could have told younger Odell, in 2015, 2016, like, don't pull your foot off the gas. Just do everything possible to enjoy your life. Like, don't, degrade your current life, because you can die tomorrow. Like, you can just get hit by a fucking car, a meteor can hit, or whatever the fuck, trip and hit your head. So enjoy your current life, but also at the same time, like, don't pull your fucking foot off the gas. Like you just got to keep trying to stack as many sats as possible humbly.
That's the key. But like, I think a lot of people listen to the stack sats part and they don't necessarily listen to the humble part.
The humble part's the hard part.
Look,
It's the game of survival.
Exactly. The getting any amount of sats from the bottom of the S to the top of the S. Like, I'm trying to like frame it like any amount of sats that you can arbitrage between now and hyper Bitcoinization is going to be stupid in a hyper Bitcoinized world. Like more money than you can imagine. Cause like that's how like you got to bake in progress. You got to bake in progress on a better system. Like it's not even just progress on our current trajectory. Like we are in the monetary dark ages, listening to the high priest of motherfucking fiat. Like how many of those people knew what the world would look like with electricity if we're talking about the real dark ages, right? Like we're living in an ancient world. Like literally in the like compared to future hyper Bitcoinized world, we are living in the ancient times, the olden days,
right?
And that shit's gonna happen fast. Like I think I really do agree with Balaji. Like when currencies devalue, it like it starts on a curve and then it's over. Like it happens fast. So, I'm not saying it's going to happen 2030, 2050, whatever. I think it's going to happen in our lifetime. So we need to make strategic decisions to literally get our bodies and our sats that we have today to the future world. Yeah. Like it's okay. Like, hey, you could have told Matt in 2015, like, don't take your foot off the gas. But what does that look like? And like, how does Matt optimize for survivability and getting any like pre-hyper Bitcoinized sats to hyper Bitcoinized future world? Like that's like framing that I want to talk about, because it's a whole nother level of like thinking about survivability. And ultimately like of getting to being super fucking rich, that you have lots and lots of optionality in a hyper Bitcoinized world. If you have multiple Bitcoins, congratulations, you've more than succeeded in getting enough sats for that accomplishment.
Bitcoin is Bitcoin.
Whatever. You have multiple 100 million Satoshi chunks.
There you go.
You've more than succeeded on that part. Like, don't be one of those losers in 2013 who topped out in sat count, because you might be in the hyper Bitcoinized world with fewer sats, significantly fewer sats, because you didn't think of what that scale of change is going to look like. Any of that make sense? Was that just
no? I mean,
stupid ramble.
No. I mean, I think that I agree with you. First of all, I like how Parker frames it gradually then suddenly. And I do feel like we're either at the tail end of the gradually phase or the beginning of the suddenly, and it doesn't really matter. But this feels like the moment. It feels like Bitcoin's moment with the financial, economic chaos that's going on. People are starting to really wake up. I think on a risk adjusted basis, Bitcoin has never been more intriguing as a potential asset to hold, or and also to use, right? I mean, holding is using, but to spend and to be able to spend without permission, have no permission required.
Why is Nasser so huge? Because the feeling of like using your Bitcoins for micropayments, I really do think that that's one of the biggest reasons.
But I think like if you look back, so you use the dark ages as a metaphor, right?
Sure.
But if you go even closer than that, you go to the gold rush in the early 1900s, late 1800s, going out west, settling the western United States, accumulating land, accumulating gold. None of those people were bullish enough, right? Maybe some of them were, but most of them weren't, right? And so when I look at it, I kind of look at it, okay, we are in this unique position where we have a realization, we understand this, right? And if you look at most people that have become successful, they have a focus. They have a focus, and they basically have one big bet that they make the lion's share of their success off of. It's not people diversifying. Diversification is a way to reduce the erosion of your wealth. It's not a way to build wealth or build success. And this is our moment. Like, we were born in this weird, I mean, everyone was born at different times, but me and you were born at this weird time where it was like the inflection point between the analog and the digital world, where we didn't grow up with cell phones and we didn't grow up with social media. We didn't grow up with all this stuff, but we saw it all kind of happen. And we also ended up in a situation where Bitcoin was being nurtured and was coming of age, right? Was happening. And to me, this is our moment. And don't squander that moment, right? And I'm not saying make a leveraged bet, right? I'm not saying ape in. You want to survive, hence the stay humble part. But ultimately, like, the goal has to be to stack as many sats as possible. Like, there is no any time spent on obtaining sats today is worth 100x the time spent in maybe 10 years even, right? Or like, who knows the time scale, right? But
probably
like,
way better. Well, probably way better.
but like, if I
Yeah.
spend an hour today trying to obtain sats, I'm getting like 10x on 4 years from now or something like that, right? So if you're talking as sats as a unit of time, if you're talking about sats priced in time, then there's literally no better time than to try and obtain as many as possible.
So I agree. Like, the thing is like, I'm not disagreeing with that at all.
The 37 sats is so low. It's like too low. I don't think 37 sats is generational wealth. Do you really believe that, or is it just I know every good meme is based in reality.
My whole thing is that, let me explain 37 sats. 37 sats is the block reward in 95 years.
Right.
So the only
It's
thing
the
I
block
know,
subsidy.
sorry, the block subsidy,
Because transaction fees will probably be significantly more than 37
yeah, I mean,
sats.
I agree with that too. I'm just talking about the block subsidy. All I know is that if Bitcoin works, then more hashes than any single person on this planet can even begin to fathom will be directed every 10 minutes at acquiring that block.
Right.
So it's either 37 sats is worth more than all of the hashes that are being directed at the network today by orders and orders and orders of
Plus
magnitude,
transaction fees.
plus transaction fees, or it's not. So I'm just trying to like grok that, right? So the only thing that I can say is that, like, the whole network focused on one block every single time, like, that's an enormous fucking amount of, if we're in hyperbitcoinization, what all of the energy on the planet is going to be doing. And trying to like relate that to whatever we think today, you have to have your mind boggled.
No, I agree. No one can comprehend
So like,
the
it's like,
implications.
what does 37 sats equals generational wealth? I'm literally trying to like irk people from thinking about Bitcoin to 1,000,000. Like,
Right.
think about, oh, Bitcoin's going to be worth 10x more in like, my time will be worth 10x more now acquiring Bitcoin than in 10 years. Like, no, bro. It's like Bitcoin's going to happen really fucking fast. And it's like the move from the bottom of the S to the top of the S is going to be thousands on thousands on thousands on thousands of multiples. So yes, obviously you should spend as much time acquiring and getting Bitcoin from the bottom of the S to the top of the S, but you need to get to the top of the S too.
Right.
Right? Like, the Bitcoin part, check the box. You're good. Like, not saying you should not continue to acquire sats, but like, you also need to put some focus on survivability. You need to put some focus on making sure the sats are survivable.
That's the stay humble
You need
part.
like that's why this is a Stay Humble podcast, because the Stay Humble part of Stay Humble Stack Sats is like drastically underrated.
CK wanted
drastically underrated.
CK wanted to name this podcast "Stay Humble," but I didn't think anyone would listen to it if it was just "Stay Humble." It's not as sexy as the title I chose.
Which shows the problem here. Like, the Stay Humble part is actually the way better part of the advice, even though the stacking sats part is also extremely important.
The Stay Humble part's the hard part. We have, by the way, the reason,
and the more important part.
The reason why I laughed was because Nope Not Today on YouTube said lots of sexual tension in this rip, which is why I laughed. But he also said he had a really good comment. I'm curious what your response is here.
Yeah.
He said, it's better to have stacked and lost than to never have stacked at all.
Sure. My goal is to stack as much as possible and stay solvent as to never lose.
Yeah, stay humble, stack sats.
So like, again, like, it's like maybe it's better to stack and to have lost. But personally, like again, I'm not saying to not stack as much as you can. I'm
Kind
saying
of
that
feels like
like
as
you
you're
need to
saying.
weigh your priorities to survivability of that stack. Like bring that all-time high stat count across the finish line. Don't have a bunch of fucking
Well, I say
losses.
don't get discouraged if you don't have your all time. Like a lot of Bitcoiners like live in the shadow of their all time high SAT amount. I mean
Sure.
I didn't learn. I don't pretend that I'm the most humble person in the world. One of the reasons I say it so much is to remind myself to stay humble. But like it didn't just come to me one day. Like I got wrecked multiple times. Before I realized that the name of the game is survival. You need to actually survive. And there's a lot of confirmation bias out there if you look on Twitter or whatnot. Oh, this guy's an amazing trader. Oh, this guy's like he's done so well. It's like you only see the survivors. All the people that we've lost along the way, they're just not there anymore, right? You just don't even see them.
Totally. Look, my goal is the same as yours to help give people the best chance of having the most sats at the finish line.
Right.
Like, I'm just saying that there's more to this formula than the stacking sats part. A lot of it has to do with the staying humble and survivability part. And I'm just trying to say that if you think through from first principles what the world moving on to Bitcoin looks like,
Okay.
infinity divided by 21 million, if you will.
Good meme.
Like
Sounds like I don't have enough
in
sats.
what world is your current sat count right now? Probably like for the people listening to this show, not good enough in that world for you to be more than for you and your and generations of your lineage to be more than content.
Yeah, I would think that most of the audience of Dispatch is probably at a point where they will be, doing better than the majority of the world in a hyper Bitcoin situation.
All worlds
I
with
just don't know.
technological progress has always made more wealth for the lowest common denominator. So, like for example, like right now, we probably live better than the richest people in ancient Egypt by orders of magnitude,
Right.
right? So, if you project that forward, and again, like the whole point about Bitcoin is like the fiat system is inefficient bullshit. We don't have energy where we need it. The monetary system is it inhibits us from allocating wealth accurately. So theoretically, if Bitcoin is right and it's the thing that is going to upgrade humanity, like infinity gets bigger, right?
Right.
So it's 21 infinity divided by 21
Yeah,
million, but
that's what the
infinity
Bitcoin deniers don't understand that part. The
the
people that say like you can't have a deflationary currency,
well,
that's
sure, but
human
the
productivity
Bitcoiners should
increases.
think this, right?
Right.
Like so infinity is going to get bigger. So, not only are we moving from, an ancient dark monetary world, the dark ages of the monetary revolution, we're going into like the enlightenment of that, right? We're the fix like Jeff Booth tries to describe this. It's like you can't measure the new system by the old system. Like you have to completely divorce your brain from that. So again, like I want everyone to have maximum sats across the finish line. I'm just trying to ring the bell that like there's more to it. And you talk about this all the time. I just think that like we don't emphasize the survivability element. And look, hey, living a normal life. I live in the US. For the most part, I'm pretty average. Like, it's not like I'm
Right.
doing
Same.
extreme things to survive. But, one of the biggest things that you can do is like staying solvent and like being humble with your stacking for where you're biasing survivability rather than risk taking.
Right.
Personally, like I think that is good advice. And if you think about the actual success story of this thing, like you made it. Good job. You like if you're
We
listening to the
haven't yet.
show,
Not
you
yet.
figured out the sat part.
Hasn't happened
You
yet.
got to get it across the finish line.
Hasn't happened yet.
Sure. So stay solvent between now and then. Like focus on that.
I think you said a word maybe 10 minutes ago, 15 minutes ago, optionality, right?
Yeah.
And the more sats you can stack today, the more optionality you have in the future.
How about stack and keep?
Yeah, stack and keep. I mean, first of all, to be absolutely clear, I think most of the freaks who listen to the show already understand. If you're not holding self-custody, you're not stacking sats, you're stacking IOUs. So I've had people say to me, oh, you should hold your own keys at the end of stable stacks. It's implied. Otherwise, you're not stacking sats, you're stacking IOUs. You're going to get rugged eventually. You want to learn the tools. You want to learn how to use the tools. We might have adversarial environments that get much worse in your different countries. We don't know. We have a global audience here at Dispatch, but in America, we can see it happening in America where there's an adversarial situation, and you're going to need to know how to use the tools before that situation happens. You don't want to learn this stuff as the crises are kind of unfolding and everyone's freaking out and running to the exits and things are becoming illegal and stuff like that, right?
No, but yeah, I 100% agree. Like the educating to the best practices, like, and most of this talk is towards like hardcore Bitcoiners who've been here for a little bit. Like, I understand, like, people have their goals. You should get to your goals. I think people should think about their goals and like apply that to their their life mission. Like, this is a little bit of like personal finance advice. But not to redirect the conversation a little bit, but let's like talk through like the hyper Bitcoinization or Bitcoin scenarios in general.
Let's talk through it.
The way I think about Bitcoin playing out is there's 3 likely scenarios for Bitcoin. Bitcoin works and infinity divided by 21 million. I personally think that's the most likely scenario, but I'm talking my book. I'm very into Bitcoin. I think that, I'm obviously convinced.
You're all in.
Yeah. I mean, definitely all in with my time. Yeah. So there's no question there.
That's all that matters. Yeah.
Next likely scenario is Bitcoin fails.
Right.
So and when I say fail, I mean like irrelevant. Like, for example, like, do you know what the potential operating systems of, the internet or the potential, the potential,
like the competitors,
competitors to
TCP/IP.
TCP. Do you know about any of that stuff? Like, how often do you think about that? How relevant is that to your life?
Right.
So like Bitcoin could fail. It could be like that. 0, no one gives a shit about it. Maybe there's like some history about it, whatever. Like, that's the next likely scenario. And then the third most likely, but the least likely of the scenarios is Bitcoin is just another asset, right? So that's actually the reality we live in right now. Like,
so you think that's the least likely?
By far, that's the least likely.
0 or 1 or...
Yeah, I mean, I think it's far more likely for Bitcoin to fail than for us to be like in this multi-chain, like not even multi-chain, like multi-store of value asset world. Like, right. I think that is like, this is the anomaly right now.
You either think Bitcoin sucks all the air out of the room or it doesn't.
Yeah, or it fails. Exactly. And I mean, no one is really willing to think about like what that actually looks like, or very few people are. But, if I'm going to be planning, the least likely thing I'm planning for is the third scenario. And the next 2 most likely things that I'm planning for is Bitcoin everything or Bitcoin nothing.
How are you planning for Bitcoin nothing? You're like completely fucked if that happens.
I mean, guns, bullion, survival skills, trying to, understand, get as close as possible to the money printer. I mean, there's a lot of different things that you can do to try to plan for the Bitcoin 0 scenario. I mean, right now, it feels like the Bitcoin success story is escalating.
I'm a big believer in ammo as a as it's just a good thing to stack in general.
Sure, I'm just trying to say, like, I'm trying to calibrate towards what the future is actually going to look like. So, in the Bitcoin everything scenario, I just think that any amount at the bottom of the S is stupid at the top of the S, because we can't think exponentially. Because if you think about the thinkers of the past projecting into the future, like, not only were they off, but they are off by insane amounts. Like, not even close. Like, Nikola Tesla and Ford were like the only people that could think through like what Bitcoin looked like back in the, just 100 years ago. When I say 37 sats equals generational wealth, that's 95 years from now. This 37 sats is the block reward.
Right.
That's about a similar time scale, and we're talking about, we're living in a digitally connected internet viral meme world that is exponentially faster than that old world.
We have ride or die freak Finch, who's going to lose a bunch of money because the mempools aren't going to clear again by the end of the year. In the chat saying he thinks scenario 3 is way more likely than Bitcoin dying. I kind of agree with him. I think I don't know. I mean, that's the current status quo, right? That's where we currently are at. We're currently at a situation where Bitcoin is one asset out of many assets. I don't think shitcoins. I think shitcoins are going to exist forever. I don't think individual shitcoins will outperform Bitcoin. Is my thesis. I think they all trend to zero.
Well, shitcoins will exist just like the lottery still exists. Like the
lottery is extremely successful.
There's going to be stupid people.
People
forever,
are greedy, right?
But I mean, at the same time, like a Bitcoin world has way different incentives, and like any group of population at any given time during the arc of modernity can't relate to their previous arc. So it's just really difficult to to put that into context, right? Like, can you relate at all to like any arcs in the early kingdoms of Europe? Like any populations there. Like if you met that person, a person from that time, it'd be like meeting an alien, like a crazy person.
Right.
So again, like I'm just trying to Bitcoiners are sometimes so fiat minded, like they're not thinking exponentially into the future. They're still operating on like our current scale of progress, like what the world looks like today, like the base assumptions. And I just think that it's irrational to think that way about Bitcoin. Like that's not Bitcoin's nature. Like that's not the arc of technology as it takes a grip of the world. Like what logically happens is exponential growth and a complete redesign of everything.
Right.
Like being more bullish is logical in this sense. Like thinking in stupid hyperbole numbers around Bitcoin is the logical first principled way of trying to articulate its arc. Like we're all way too stupid to be bullish enough if it's actually true. If it actually works out.
Yeah, no, I mean, I'm a very simple person. I think Bitcoin accrues value over time with adoption. And I think adoption will increase with need. And I think the need is apparent and will become more obvious to people over time. So you go down that route and it's like, okay, I don't have enough sats. The way I look at it is, so you said, the way I look at it with my family at least is, and the freaks are probably intimately aware of this already, but I expect in 20 years, I'll be living in a cabin in the woods. Now, if Bitcoin's as successful as I expect it to be, I will own the land. And if Bitcoin doesn't, I'll be like squatting on federal land or some shit like that. But no matter what, like that is going to probably be a similar end game. And the difference there is essentially optionality. And I don't know where else I would store my time. I just don't have any other real options. There's no other good options for me to store my time. You look at store of values, gold doesn't work. It's really hard to take custody. It's really hard to verify. It's really hard to do any kind of transfers. You want to transfer $4 million in gold, you need to hire armored trucks and whatnot. It's fucking insane. You're going to put it on planes. Real estate, number one real estate market in the world was Hong Kong. Overnight, jurisdictional reasons, worthless, right? One of the largest real estate markets in the world was New York, right? And they decided to close all the restaurants and basically socialize all the apartments, right? So real estate's not really a good store of value at all, investment real estate. And then so you look at all your options, the stock market is completely fucking rigged. And you're kind of left with Bitcoin as the only real option where you have property rights, governed by math and protected.
That's why I think it's
game theory.
That's why I think it's very unlikely that it's just another asset.
Yeah, but I mean, I would say that's why it's unlikely that it goes to zero or disappears or fails.
Well, it fails or goes to zero, like if the game theory is broken, or if there is something that makes it irrelevant.
Right.
So if something makes it irrelevant, like ultimately that would be good for mankind. Like I don't think that's likely, And if the game theory is broken, like, a lot of Bitcoiners are like harping about like what's wrong with the game theory. So like that the jury's still out there.
Right.
But I personally think the game theory is incredibly attuned and it's actually dynamic. It's not. It's always upgrading. The game theory of Bitcoin is always upgrading because the world is always changing and our understanding of Bitcoin is always changing.
Yeah, nobody understands Bitcoin. I strongly believe that nobody understands. Like, I don't understand Bitcoin.
Yeah, so I mean, I just admit
try.
I admit that in my price projections, and I just like try to correct to the hyperbolic bullish side because I actually think that's logical.
Yeah, so you don't have enough Bitcoin.
And again, like the whole point is like I want to have the max amount of sats on the other side. But like,
Exactly.
but again, like
Do we disagree on everything? What do we disagree on?
I think we disagree on the narrative and the framing, but
And what is that?
well, how to get to the other side with the most amount of sats, I think maybe I don't even know if we disagree, but like giving that investment advice, I
Right.
think maybe we disagree on.
I'm not giving investment advice. I'm giving life advice.
Same shit.
Yeah.
Yeah, like
Look,
it's hard to have a life without good investment.
I'm not the
good
type of
management.
person that says all this shit and then it's like not investment advice. I mean, and
Look, Bitcoiners love giving investment advice. I'm giving investment advice right now, not investment advice. It's a podcast, but I'm trying to get people to think about Bitcoin a certain way and then actually apply that to how they make decisions in life.
right.
So like, look, you could think
It's about priorities.
yeah, and like priorities being attuned to likely scenarios in the future make them strategic, right? They make them powerful. Like if your priorities are misaligned, then like it kind of wrecks you because you're dumping your time into something that doesn't get you, doesn't get you where you want to be.
Well,
if
so
you will.
let's talk about what priorities might supersede stacking sats.
Yeah. So the whole point of the priorities that may supersede stacking sats are things that help you bring the max amount of sats across the finish line. So like let's just be clear. Like sometimes you have to forego adding a little bit more to your supply, to make a good decision, right? So like
Right.
maybe getting land at a certain period of time is worth it. Like
Agreed.
maybe investing in hardware wallets that matter is worth it, right?
Ammo, agreed.
Ammo,
Building strong local communities,
yeah, all that.
absolutely integral.
100%. Thinking through teaching people how to get the Bitcoin you have and make sure it actually makes it to your family.
Inheritance.
If like the inheritance element, like that like that if you have a million sats, 1/21th of the entire network and you die and no one knows how to get it,
Right.
it's done. It doesn't even matter. So like just because you accumulate that many sats, like your error was that you didn't have a loved one to pass it on to and you didn't teach them and they didn't understand how to do it. Like look yourselves in the face. Like your inheritance plan is equally as important as your sat stacking. If you actually are serious about giving it to someone else, if you're actually like serious about your children, not just
Right. If you
you.
care about generational wealth rather than just personal wealth.
Yeah, I mean, like again, you could die tomorrow. I could walk out this building and get hit by a car.
Right.
Like, I
Looks both ways, freaks.
sometimes I drive like an asshole. Like, who knows? Like there's plenty of I can think through my 20s and I can think of so many times I got lucky that I wasn't dead.
Right.
Right? So that paradigm hasn't ended either. So there again, I'm not saying don't stack sats. I'm saying there's a lot of things to think about that are
Yeah, I mean, we have
important
John
for
here.
the goal, which is
We have
like
John
be wealthy
talking.
in hyperbitcoinization.
We have John here talking about children. Obviously, children are very sat expensive, right? I would say that's a fulfilling endeavor.
You also need that for the future.
Right.
Like you will decay and end.
Right.
So again, like
I agree with all this.
the only my whole thing is like if you apply the proper bullishness on your sats, you appreciate the sats you already have a lot more and you might think about like the longevity of those sats because again, like the hyper bitcoinized world, any amount of Bitcoin that we have right now will be stupid then. I can't emphasize that enough.
But you're over indexing on that side of the equation. There's the overwhelming majority of people that own and use Bitcoin today are thinking on the opposite. They think on the opposite level. They think, Bitcoin is up 10x in fiat terms. Like I need to rebalance and reduce my Bitcoin position. They're not thinking, like that's the overwhelming majority of people right now, right?
So yeah, I mean, again, I'm talking to the hardcore Bitcoin.
And if you ask like anybody over the last not 20 years, if you ask anybody over the last 14 years, if the reality is the majority of them went through like this rebalance phase where they were like, oh, Bitcoin commands too much. Because if you wait long enough, if we're right, and historically this has been the case, like Bitcoin, if you don't do anything, Bitcoin will just be your entire net worth.
Yeah, Bitcoin puts you on zero by itself. Like you
Yeah.
don't have to do anything to get on zero.
Just
Eventually,
over
Bitcoin will
time,
just put you on
it
zero.
just eats your portfolio or whatever.
Yeah, well, it just it appreciates exponentially faster than all that stuff. So, like, I guess what I'm trying to say is like the best thing that any person can do today is acquire amount of Bitcoin that they can get to hyperbitcoinization, because on the path to hyperbitcoinization, it will put you on zero by itself. You don't have to do anything about it. The key is getting it over there. And like, look, I'm not my advice is not to get only 37 sats.
You should get a lot more than 37.
My advice is get as many as you can actually get across the finish line, because we can't fathom the future Bitcoin world in Bitcoin terms. Like we have a very, very hard time doing it. But if we actually get to that world, again, 3 scenarios: Bitcoin eats everything, Bitcoin zero, Bitcoin's just another asset. Like if Bitcoin eats everything, then we can't fathom what the world looks like in Bitcoin terms, but we should try to get there. We should try to get our Bitcoin there with whoever we care about to have it, whether it's us or them, whether it's me or my children. Like that's where we are in history. So it's like, get as much as you can.
Yes.
Get as much of San Francisco as you can going out west, right? Buy it all up. Like
buy all the land in Wyoming.
But don't be like, no one remembers the guy who bought all the land and then lost it.
Right.
No one remembers that guy. Like you can't and guess what? If you just bought one apartment in San Francisco and held it from those days versus someone who had it all and then had nothing when San Francisco actually rose to prominence, then like you're doing better. Like the one apartment actually, the one hit is better. The 37 sats, the 3,500, whatever you want to call it, from the bottom part of the S curve is worth it on the top of the S curve.
And if you own an apartment in San Francisco, you should sell it for Bitcoin right now.
Absolutely. I'm just you brought up the going west example.
That is investment advice.
I'm just trying to stick to that example of going west and leveraging the ability of the land grab. Like, hey, who remembers the people who owned New York and then don't own it anymore? Who didn't see like its rise? Okay,
before the Dutch,
who remembers
Americans.
them? Who remembers those people? No one. Like, you need to. The point is, like, Bitcoin matters when we're in hyper-Bitcoinization. Like, it won't fulfill its full potential for your optionality.
It matters today. I mean, 2 weeks ago, there was a bunch of rich people that were freaking out that their money wasn't in the banks. Never was.
Mm-hmm.
And I slept easy that night, right? Because I had permissionless, censorship-resistant money that wasn't controlled by a company or a government. That was today. I mean, that was 2 weeks ago, right? Like that's the present.
Again, I agree. Like, you should educate yourself about this as quickly as possible, acquire as many sats, and continue to accumulate. But with the focus of longevity, of getting it to hyper-Bitcoinization.
Yeah, no, this makes sense to me. You got to stay humble. It's a game of survival. It's always a game of survival.
So
always has been.
One thing that helps you survive is obviously being around other Bitcoiners and like the circular economy, and like Bitcoiners are already onto this stuff. Like, I'm just trying to like ring the bell about like how important all the other stuff is to the survivability of your sats. And I'm trying to tell people that your sats today are like, get more bullish about them and take more care about them and ensure their survivability even more than acquiring marginal sats. Like, in a world, I'm trying to be as logical as possible. Like, in a future Bitcoin world where Bitcoin is the denominator, like, if you have any reasonable amount of sats today, you are stupid rich in that world. Far richer than you could have ever imagined. But the key is to have it there, is to have it then. And we're still early. Like, we're still less than 1% global adoption. So everything that we've seen so far will most likely look nothing like what the future looks like.
Right. No, I agree.
We always agree, Matt. It's just about the orders of magnitude of bullishness.
Just an hour arguing over semantics.
You gotta love it, man. That's why we're friends.
But I mean, so I just want to me, like, one of the most important goals is strong local communities. Is if I look at, I mean, we'll go back to my doomer optimism. The show is called Citadel Dispatch. I believe in this idea of Citadel theory, this idea of hyperlocalism. I think these large centralized institutions have done us wrong. They're corruptible by nature. And as a result, we have to go back to the basics, of these very strong, smaller local communities that work together and stand up for each other. But then also there'll still be global trade. And because of Bitcoin, global trade has less friction, right? And because of other technologies, global trade will have less friction. I mean, I remember I had a conversation with Bitcoin Sign guy back like almost 4 years ago now today, where we were talking about like onion routed drones and stuff, and transferring goods between different local communities paid for with Bitcoin. Lightning didn't really exist yet, but like now you could imagine it with Lightning involved as well. And obviously that's a major focus for both of us, in this idea of nurturing and making these communities more robust and making Bitcoin stronger together. I'm a strong believer that together Bitcoiners are way stronger than individually, right? It's like the twig analogy, right? Like one twig is easy to break, but if you put a bunch of twigs together, it's hard to break the twigs together.
Yeah, we need to keep building the Bitcoin coalition, right? And like with the small towns or the small communities or the citadels, the way I agree with that vision. Like, I'm open-minded to seeing that change, but my mental model is everything from every institution, from like religion to knowledge to language to math to governments to military, all of that stuff, everything, table manners, morality, all of that is to achieve further scale for human beings. Like, human beings are constantly coming up with new ways to further scale.
Right.
So Bitcoin is the next step to increase our scaling ability, and the way that we behave on Bitcoin will actually lead to a more scalable future. And I do think like this idea of like small, tight knit local communities, citadels, if you will, competing jurisdictions, that increases scale, that increase optionality, that will exponentially increase value for the planet. So, following the ways of Bitcoin is moving us towards that brighter, better, more bullish future per se.
Yep. No, I agree.
But I mean,
We're on the same page there.
let's pivot to like the kind of community part. And again, like, people are always like, why should I spend money to go to the Bitcoin conference or any other event, right?
Or
Like,
anything.
yeah, like, why shouldn't I just like sit there and stack sats? Like, that's great, but like, there's an awesome opportunity to meet Bitcoiners, to spend more of your time in the space by becoming employed in the space or whatever at these in-person gatherings. And not to say that you should spend your sats on that, but like the benefits of building the other elements of what's going to get you across the finish line it's really important. And it's something that, Bitcoiners should value just as much as they kind of value, stacking sats and whatever they do around Bitcoin.
Yeah, I mean, there's definitely a value there, right? Like, the people have to make a educated decision, right? Basically, on everything where their sats are worth being placed, right? And I think there's so we have love it or hate it. There's when you throw an event that is over 20,000 people. Last year we had over 20,000 people in Miami. There's going to be things that people don't like, right? And there's going to be things that are very positive. And that's what you see on an event of that kind of scale. But there's nothing like it. There's like Miami Bitcoin conference, Miami. There's nothing even comes close to comparing to the sheer scale of that kind of gathering of Bitcoiners. There's just so many people.
Yeah, I mean, I like to call it the physical manifestation of the Bitcoin ecosystem every single year, right? So it's not everything, it's not everyone, but once a year, like there's a Schelling point where everyone kind of comes together. So
Fucking overwhelming
it's a lot.
in a positive and negative way. There's not,
And the thing is like that Schelling point can change, right? That Schelling point is like the Bitcoin ecosystem, but right now it is Miami, and being a part of that is like it's very intoxicating. And I know we were just talking about the FOMO of Costa Rica, and I'm sure we would have liked to like pull some strings to been able to be there, but like the energy is intoxicating when you have like this kind of Schelling point of an idea come together.
Costa Rica is the closest thing to Bitcoin FOMO I've ever had. A massive shout out to everyone who ran that event. I was watching virtually, but it's never the same actually being in person. And
definitely not.
I had good
you can't
personal
hug people
reasons.
virtually, right?
Yeah, I had good personal reasons for not making it out there, but that seems like a great event. So, I mean, CK, like you've rose to um, leadership within Bitcoin Magazine. How do you look at running an event of that size, of that scale? Like, how do you think about it? I mean, obviously, like you see all the different pieces, right? You see how the sausage is made. Like, how do you think about it?
I mean, it's just a 10,000 input project. Like I really do think of it as like this, like just massive project, with thousands and thousands of stakeholders. Whether it's the people who view it virtually, attend, make it possible by sponsoring or working or whatever. It's just all these inputs, and you have to stay organized. And really, we're doing our best to like create a stage and create a platform and create a place that is good enough to attract and to like bring together the most amount of stakeholders in the Bitcoin ecosystem. So it's like that challenge of like, how do you plan something that's worthy, and how do you like put together something that will delight like as many stakeholders as possible and help Bitcoin move forward and open the door to Bitcoin culture and what Bitcoin is to as many people as possible, and do that well, right? Like,
Right.
be able to
Easier
like
said
get
than
people
done.
in the door like without waiting in lines, like make sure everyone has like a comfortable place to be, make sure like you are having the business conversations that you want to have, make sure that you are able to display to the public what you've been your project or your company's been working on for an entire year, like just putting all those pieces together, prioritizing, making everyone happy, making the city of Miami Beach happy. They want to get rid of spring break, so they want us to like help crowd out the riffraff and like just all this like crazy stuff. Like it's a massive endeavor for less than 100 people to put on, and to
Tiny team.
and to make people, and again, like make a massive group of people with very different interests happy,
People don't realize how small the team is.
and making it financially possible too.
Yeah,
It's
not
it's
lose all your
crazy.
sats in the process.
David Bailey prioritizes the Bitcoin community over sat count on many levels. Like I definitely would not be as gung ho about making awesome experiences happen as David Bailey is. He's just always trying to do bigger, better, more. It's crazy.
Well, I remember like so Bitcoin 2019 was awesome. It's like 2,500 people. And then Bitcoin 2020 was supposed to be in LA. And it was early April or late March was when that was supposed to happen. So it was literally like 3 weeks after the lockdowns hit the whole country. So that got scrapped. The company went into like pure survival mode. Then Bitcoin 2021 was like the great comeback story. There was like 13,000 people there. That team was, I mean, I started working with you in that.
That's when you started helping. Was around
Was
the Bitcoin
before that.
21. Like,
Was
yeah, leading up to that.
was fall 2020,
Yep.
right? In the lead up to that, that team was what, like 25 people or something like that, put on a 13,000 person event.
Dylan LeClaire was selling T-shirts.
Yeah, I mean, Dylan was like 12 years old. That was pure chaos. It was structured chaos in the lead up to that event. People don't. I don't think people really realize like what I probably aged those 2 months in the lead up of that, like might have aged, 5 years, 10 years, just on that process. And then 2021 was insane. And then 2022 was like, how many people came in 2022?
25,000.
And the team maybe doubled in size. Maybe it was like 60 people, 70 people, right?
Yeah, doubled in we doubled in what we thought was our sophistication, but the complexity increased by more than that too. So
yeah,
it's crazy. Like
now we're about to hit 2023 in 55 days.
55 days, man.
And then in between there was Bitcoin Amsterdam.
Yep.
Which was awesome because we got to meet there's a huge Dutch community.
Amsterdam is such an awesome city too. It's a really cool city to just hang out in. I'm working hard to make Bitcoin Amsterdam a reality again, by the way.
Is that going to happen again?
I'm working hard.
He's working on
I'm applying tremendous amounts of pressure to our Dutch counterparts.
Yeah, no, it's good. And then the print magazine came back in the meantime. It's amazing how quick time flies.
The new one's gonna be fire too. Bitcoiners should get hyped about that. That's a collectible worth stacking.
So I'd be remiss if I didn't mention we are doing the same open source ticket program that we did last year, but expanded, even more projects. So I think right now we're at 46 open source projects, contributors to those projects with a commit before March 1st, get a free ticket to Bitcoin 2023. We're going to try and hit 60 projects. I keep adding projects as we find them.
Yeah, I mean, I keep pushing Matt. I want to give 200 open source contributors tickets to the event. Yeah. That's more than double what we did last year.
Right, we did a little over 100 last year.
Yeah, so I'm pushing Matt hard to be like, find more projects with people who want to come. So
I'm happy to give away tickets to the open source contributors that do so much in this space. I mean,
so it's the least that we can do. And again, the open source contributors coming to the event brings so much wealth and relevance.
So you know that guy Finch who was giving you shit?
Yeah.
In the comments earlier.
Sure.
And also is going to lose the mempool bet.
Yeah.
He became an open source contributor between last year and this year under the hope that we were going to do the program again. And now he's coming to Miami with a free ticket. And that's exactly what we want to see. We want to see, first of all, freaks, the reason there's a date that is after our announcement is because we don't want people going and spamming these projects with bullshit contributions. But also we want to see more people go into the open source world, more people feel compelled to kind of contribute to this movement. And I think Finch is a perfect example of that.
Totally. And thank you, Finch, for what you've done for Bitcoin, and excited to shake your hand in Miami. Glad that we could save you some sats on your ticket.
He's been an internet friend for like 2.5 years. I don't think I've shook his hand yet, unless he didn't tell me and just came up to me and shook my hand.
Well, the first time we met, I introduced myself without doxing my internet identity.
Oh yeah, so fuck pissed. CK, man. He was like, "Hi, I'm Christian," and then we had a whole lunch or whatever, and I already knew him as CK Snarks, and I figured out maybe like a week later or half a week later that put 2 and 2 together.
Let's just try not to fanboy too hard, Matt.
I will say that if you do
it was a good dinner though, or a good lunch.
If you come up to me in Miami, and we know each other through the internet, just introduce yourself as your name. Like, don't introduce yourself as Paul or whatever and have us have like a 10-minute conversation and then tell me your name. Like, just, that's your name. That's how I know you. So just consider it. But if you do have, we have a lot of open source contributors that listen to Dispatch. I probably don't say it enough. But there is this program. So if you want to come to Miami, you're an open source contributor, your project is probably listed already. Go to b.tc/conference/open source. And you can apply there, and we'll get you a free ticket.
Let's go. 200 ticket grants, and it's a 3-day ticket, so every single day you get it.
I think we can blast by
no holdbacks
this time.
I will up the what's it called? our inventory, the quota, the limit. Let's smash 200. Let's go, guys. But yeah, I mean, again, I would like to show all Bitcoin events, like get together with Bitcoiners and build that
Come to
community.
Bitcoin Park. Come visit us here.
One of the best things about Nashville, I mean, like Rod and Matt, they did a lot to kind of like bring a lot of momentum here with the Nashville Bitcoin meetup. But obviously creating the premier in-person space for Bitcoin here, and I get to enjoy it. I'm a member. I get to enjoy it when I'm not at the Bitcoin Magazine office. But it's incredible, and again, like these spaces, these kind of like small coalitions of Bitcoiners, it helps move Bitcoin forward. I'm really hopeful that we can do in Tennessee what the Texas guys have done in
Working on
Texas.
it.
And how impactful is that for Bitcoin, right? Not to say that the politicians are going to be able to enable Bitcoin. I don't think they will, but we can help them see the light so they don't expose their constituents to pain. And speaking of another event, the Bitcoin policy, the BTC policy
Based out of
crew,
the park.
based out of the park, they're putting together
Bitcoin Policy Institute.
exactly Bitcoin Policy Institute.
Working your show.
I'm sorry, man. Thank you, Matt. Always pushing me, man. But so the Bitcoin Policy Institute, BTC at BTC Policy on Twitter, they're putting on an event and they're exclusively trying to educate lawmakers and help them not make mistakes as it regards to Bitcoin, and help them make their constituents' lives as easy as possible. And I think that that's definitely a gathering worth looking into as well, just because they're going to give the people from the community that should be talking to these regulators a platform. And when you see what's coming out of the office of the
It's
presidency,
bad shit. Yeah.
I don't expect much out of them, but like hurting Americans by being undereducated about Bitcoin and being so far away from bullish enough on the value of sats post hyperbitcoinization, that's all bad. So gathering and trying to fix that and try to mitigate as much damage as possible on that front, it's huge.
Yeah, I mean, the freaks know that I think the corrupt politicians can go fuck themselves, and I don't really think they can be reasoned with. But at the same time, I mean, while we start to see all this chaos kind of unwind, I don't want my own government actively going after me. Um, and some policy advocacy is very important in your local jurisdictions and even with your federal government. And there is no other organization besides the Bitcoin Policy Institute that I choose to support. We give them free office space here at the park so they can operate out of here. Um, they're great guys like Grant, David, and all their fellows over there at the Bitcoin Policy Institute. They really do care, and they care about the right things. They're not like trying to protect the ability to dump securities on retail or launch your own shitcoin or launch your own exchange. Like they're going to try and protect self-custody, running your own node, using Bitcoin privately, the things that actually do matter. And they're making real progress on very little money, a shoestring budget. So to the freaks, I would say probably you're probably better off just stacking sats for yourself. But if you're involved in a Bitcoin company in America, you are uniquely vulnerable to American regulation. And a part of your budget should be focused on supporting the Bitcoin Policy Institute and sending employees to their events and helping them in any way you can, because it is a existential threat to your business, straight up. Like you will make less money if there's bad policy in America. And I hope to see many other policy institutes similar to this in other countries around the world, because ultimately Bitcoin is a global phenomenon.
I 100% agree. Couldn't have said it better myself, so I won't. But Bitcoin Policy Institute is putting on an amazing event. Check that out.
So when is that? Do we know when that is?
It's end of April, so it's coming up before Miami, and they'll be at Miami too. So check that out. Obviously, the Bitcoin conference. If you can't be there in person, stack sats and watch the live stream. That's free always. But talking about some things that you can calibrate to that might help you get your sats across the finish line that may be worth a little bit of opportunity cost on sats. Matt, I think you might agree with this. Stacking less sats, but doing it KYC free, might help you get those sats across the finish line.
And learn how to use it privately.
I mean, personally for me, this is just me. All my KYC sats, I discount them to 0 in my head. I have them. If I get them across, fucking gravy. But the only real sats I have are the sats that I acquired the right way.
All I have is 37 sats because that's generational wealth. So if anyone asks, that's all I have.
There we go. 37 sats. That's what I'm betting the house on, baby. 37 sats.
CK, this has been an absolute pleasure. Thank you for joining me in the studio. Before we wrap up, you have any final thoughts?
No, hey, stay humble. That's the really important part of the advice. Stack sats, get them across the finish line. And I'm here for the same goal. I'm here to help you get as many sats across the finish line. I'm trying my best to get as many sats across the finish line. So stay bullish.
I love it. Appreciate you coming on. Appreciate you. You're a good friend. I'm looking forward to Bitcoin Miami. Love you, freaks. Thanks for joining us in the live chat. I'll see you next week. I got some conversations in the works. It'll be a good week next week. So just stay tuned across all the channels. As always, you can find all the links at citadeldispatch.com. Thank you for supporting the show. Thanks for coming to the live chat. I love you all. Stay humble, stack sats. Peace.